Welcome to my Before 1900s horror channel. Tonight, we return to the year 1922, where a remote Bavarian farm fell unnervingly silent. At Hinterkaifeck, an entire family was mysteriously murdered, and the truth was never uncovered. No escape. No answers. Only fear lingering in the walls. This is the dark reality of the Hinterkaifeck murders. Stay with us, and let the story begin. March 1922. A lonely farmhouse in Bavaria, Germany. The only sign in the snowy wilderness was a pair of footprints, coming from the direction of the forest and entering the farm. The strangest thing was something else. The footprints that had come towards the house had only gone inside. There was no sign of them coming out or any second footprint in the snow. Andreas Gruber told his neighbors about this strange thing. He was not frightened, but confused. The solitude around him did not teach him to lie. That night, a lock of keys went missing from inside the house. In the courtyard outside the house was a newspaper that no one in the Gruber family had ever bought. The sound of heavy boots coming from the roof. The wooden floor creaked in the middle of the night, but despite a search, no one was found in the attic. 6 people lived in the house. They did not know that the death warrant was already knocking on their door. And that warrant was not a person, but an invisible shadow. The old maid had run away from the farmhouse 6 months earlier. She claimed that the house was cursed. She constantly felt that some incorporeal entity was watching her. On March 31st, the new maid, Maria, arrived at the house. For her, it was a new job. Little did she know that for her, death was already sitting there. When the sun went down, the Hinterkaifeck farm was covered in a strange silence. On those foggy Bavarian nights, nothing could be heard except the sound of the wind. But that night, even the wind seemed to have stopped. Andreas Gruber was a very strict and lonely man. He had many dark secrets in his life. Perhaps that secret enemy was waiting for him in the grain silo. As night fell, the shadows began to lengthen in the corners of the house. The Gruber family was at the dining table. They were not talking. Only the clanking of spoons and plates broke the silence. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the barn. An animal might be writhing in pain, or someone was deliberately luring them into the darkness. Andreas took a hurricane in his hand. The flame was flickering. He did not know that what was waiting outside was no ordinary thief or robber. He slowly walked towards the barn. As soon as he opened the wooden door, a gust of cold air hit his face. There was only darkness and the smell of hay. The murderer had a pickaxe or spade-like tool in his hand. It was the farm's own tool. The plan to end the Gruber family with his own weapon was well crafted. As Andreas peered into the darkness, a shadow moved in his hurricane light. Before he had a chance to defend himself, the first blow struck. No scream was heard. Only the sound of a heavy fall and the sound of blood spurting. The silent killer in the darkness was extremely skilled and ruthless. Then came Cecilia, Andreas' wife. When she entered the dark room in search of her husband, she met the same fate. The killer did not give her time to ask any questions. Vittoria, their widowed daughter, followed her mother into the death trap. She may have guessed something. Her throat tube was later found cut in half. 9-year-old Cecilia, a child, went there with her mother. In the last moments of her life, she tore her hair in agony. Before she died, she saw the frozen bodies of her family. The killer did not strike just once. Each body had multiple deep wounds. It was a kind of anger that had been pinned up for a long time. The 4 dead bodies were now piled on the hay, but the blood had not stopped. The murderer had not finished his work. 2 more living people were still waiting inside the house. The murderer now stepped towards the main house. His shoe prints left blood-soaked marks on the wooden floor. He knew that the little baby Joseph was still asleep in his cradle. The new maid, Maria, was lying in bed in her room. To this girl who had arrived only a few hours earlier, Hinterkaifeck was just a beautiful farm. She did not know that this was his grave. The door opened silently. Maria must have been staring sleepily into the darkness. Did she recognize the shadowy figure? That question was never answered. The blow to Maria was direct and final. Then the murderer advanced towards the baby Joseph's room. The 2-year-old child lying in the cradle was his final target. Why this cruelty towards an innocent child? Maybe the killer didn't want any heir to this blood to live. Or he was just satisfying his bloodlust. It took only a few minutes for the 6 murders to end. The entire farmhouse became as quiet as a tomb again, but the murderer did not leave. That night, smoke could be seen rising from the chimney of Hinterkaifeck. None of the neighbors knew that the murderer was cooking his own dinner by the heat of the fire. The bodies were buried under the straw in the barn. The murderer lived in their drawing room. He ate the food the Gruber family had stored and slept in their bed. The murderer had a bunch of keys with him. He fed the animals regularly. As if the murders were just a small part of his daily routine, he was in no hurry. The snow continued to fall outside, but the neighbors, seeing the smoke coming out of the chimney of the farmhouse, thought that the Gruber family might be inside. No one knew that the murderer was sitting by the fire warming his hands. The murderer did not just eat or sleep there. She was regularly feeding and milking the cows on the farm. It was as if she had become an invisible part of the family. April 1st, little Cecilia did not go to school. Her teacher thought she might be sick. But no one from the Gruber family sent any message. The silence around began to thicken. On Saturday night, the seat reserved for the Gruber family in church was empty. They were very religious, so their absence sowed the first seeds of suspicion in the minds of the villagers. The village postman noticed that the mailbox in front of the house was full of newspapers and letters from the past few days. No one had taken them in. Yet there was a flicker of light visible through the windows of the house. The murderer knew how long he would be safe. He took advantage of the darkness to walk around the yard. His fresh footprints on the snow led back inside the house. April 4th, a neighbor named Loren's Schlittenbauer decided to go to the farm with a few others. They thought that the Gruber family might have been infected with an epidemic. When they reached the farm gate, it was unusually quiet. Even the farm dog was nowhere to be found. It was later discovered that the murderer had tied it up too. Lorenz first pushed the barn door. It was not locked from the inside. The heavy wooden door swung open with a creak. A foul, putrid smell hit their noses. No one was prepared to see what they saw in the light of the lantern they were holding. 4 frozen bodies were buried under a pile of straw. The blood had dried and turned black. On top was Vittoria. Below her were her mother and father. And at the bottom of all lay 9-year-old Cecilia. Their eyes were still wide open in terror. Lorenz Schlittenbauer's hands did not shake as he moved the bodies. The neighbors were surprised to see that he already knew where everything was. Then they entered the main house. Half-eaten food was still lying on the kitchen table. It seemed that someone had left it only a few minutes ago. When they opened the door to the maid Maria's room, they found her dead. Her bedsheets were soaked in blood. The murderer had sent her to the other side in her sleep. Finally, they reached Joseph's cradle. The little child was still lying in his cradle, but his breathing had stopped forever. The scene was so terrible that even the strongest men cried. When the police arrived, they searched every corner of the farm. They saw that someone had spread straw on the attic floor to make a place to sleep. From there, if you looked down into the drawing room, you could see the dining table. That is, the killer was observing the Gruber family's every move from above day after day. The most mysterious thing was the 2 holes found in the floor. The killer had removed the attic tiles and managed to peek down. He was literally sitting on their heads. Every lock on the farm was intact. This meant that the killer had not come from outside, or that he had the real key to the house. The key had been lost a few days earlier. When the investigators examined the animals, they were surprised. The animals were not hungry. They were taken care of. The killer was kinder to animals than to people. A strange story spread among the villagers. Some claimed that they had seen the shadow of an unknown man in the farm window at midnight, holding an axe. The autopsy report revealed a shocking fact. Little Cecilia did not die immediately. She lived for a few hours and pulled out the hair near her neck in fear. Who could this murderer be? A vagrant? Or someone known to the family? The police had no answers, because no valuables were stolen from the farm. The smoke coming out of the chimney of the farm after the murders meant that the murderer had been living there for 4 days. He had spent day after day with the bodies. The whole area was in a state of panic. No one knew if the murderer was still hiding in the forest or if he had merged into the crowd in the village. The investigators noticed one thing that surprised them. The murderer had covered each body with straw and a broken door. Was this just an attempt to hide, or was the murderer afraid to look into the eyes of the dead? The police dog squad was brought in. But the smell of fresh blood and the smell of decay inside the house were so strong that the dogs became confused. They could not move in any particular direction. The bodies were beheaded. Specialist doctors came from Munich. They thought that examining the wounds on the skull would give them the exact size of the weapon used by the murderer. The heads were sent to Munich for an autopsy. But strangely, the heads were lost in the chaos of war. The souls of Hinterkaifeck still lie in their graves without their heads. The villagers first pointed fingers at Loren's Schlittenbauer. He was Vittoria's ex-lover. They were in a legal battle over Joseph's paternity. When Lorenz first discovered the bodies, he was not afraid. He pulled Vittoria's body out of the pile of corpses with great ease. His cold demeanor made everyone suspicious. But no irrefutable evidence was found against Lorenz. He claimed that he was worried about his own child. But he never accepted Joseph in his heart. Then came a second possibility. Vittoria's first husband, Karl Gabriel. He was recorded as having died in World War I in 1914. But no one had ever seen his body. The village rumor was that Karl was not dead. He had perhaps returned from the war to find his wife the mother of another man's child. And that humiliation had turned him into a bloodthirsty monster. Several witnesses claimed to have seen someone who looked like Karl wandering around the forest long after the war. Was he keeping watch over his own farm day after day? The police questioned more than 100 people. Tramps, thieves, and even the butcher from the neighboring village were not excluded. But every clue ended in a dark alley. A few days before the murder, Andreas Gruber had told neighbors that the footprints he had seen in the snow had only gone inside the house. This fact proved that the killer had already been living in the house. The straw found in the ceiling or attic of the house was very carefully arranged. This meant that the killer had been lying there day after day, listening to the laughter and conversation of the Gruber family. Did he come downstairs at night, when everyone was asleep? Maybe he ate with them at the same table in the dark, while the Gruber family slept peacefully upstairs. This idea is the most painful. There is someone in your own house whom you cannot see, but who is counting your every breath. Hinterkaifeck was a living example of that invisible fear. In 1923, the decision was made to completely demolish the farmhouse. The locals believed that the land was cursed. It was impossible to grow crops or live here. While demolishing the house, the workers found a rusty pickaxe under the floor. This was the cursed weapon with which 6 lives were taken. Even after the weapon was found, no fingerprints were found. By then, a lot of time had passed. The killer may have started life under a new identity somewhere else in the world. The police did not close the file for years. In the 1950s, 1970s, and even in 2007, new technologies were used to investigate. But every modern technology was defeated by this mystery. In 2007, students at the German Police Academy conducted an investigation using modern forensics. They identified a prime suspect, but they did not reveal his name. They said that the suspect had died by then. Out of respect for his descendants and due to the lack of irrefutable evidence, it was not possible to reveal his name. The mystery was again shrouded in darkness. To this day, a monument stands in that Bavarian wilderness. The names of 6 people are engraved there, who were not just victims of a murder, but became symbols of a long-lasting terror. When the wind blows hard, locals still think that they can hear cries coming from the direction of that destroyed farm. Or maybe the sound of invisible footsteps that only penetrate inside. People die, houses are demolished, times change. But the cold wind of Hinterkaifeck still asks the question, who was that shadow? Is he still hiding somewhere among us? The truth is sometimes more terrifying than imagination, because the truth has no end. Hinterkaifeck is not a crime story. It is an eternal silence that sends a chill down our spine. Many believe that the Hinterkaifeck murderer was not a single person. Perhaps it was the result of some past sin of the Gruber family, which returned in the form of a distorted shadow. When the house was demolished, some strange things were found deep in the surrounding forest. Some torn clothes and a small diary, the pages of which were completely blank. Did the empty diary belong to the murderer? Did he not want to have any existence of his own? Or did he want his cruelty to live only in people's memories, not on paper? Investigators noticed that the murderer's compassion for animals was not ordinary. Had he begun to imagine himself as the new owner of this farm? Perhaps during those 4 days the murderer spoke to the empty chairs of the dead Gruber family. Or he celebrated his own loneliness by sitting next to their frozen bodies in the solitude of the dark. Modern psychologists believe that the murderer was an organized sociopath, who did not come to kill, but to take the lives of others and establish his own right there. Today, only a gray stone stands on the site of that farmhouse. In the surrounding villages, mothers still forbid their children to go out alone at night. Whether it is superstition or reality, the eyes of the elders of Bavaria blink when they hear the name Hinterkaifeck. They know that some wounds cannot be erased even with time. The village church records still list the cause of death of the Gruber family as unknown assailant. More than a century has passed, but the word unknown has not changed. We may never know whose hand wielded that heavy weapon. We will never know why he stood by the cradle of the baby Joseph and did not hesitate for a moment. Is fear only in death? Or is fear in the uncertainty, which proves that someone lurking in the dark corner is stronger than us? Hinterkaifeck has taught us that even a locked door is not safe. If the hunter has already set up camp inside your house, there is no escape. Snowfall still blankets Bavaria. Footprints still mark the deserted paths. But people no longer dare to follow those footprints. If you ever stand in that empty wilderness, you will hear whispers in the wind. They are still seeking proof of their innocence. Do the souls of those who have not been tried find peace? Or do they still circle around that deserted farm, waiting for the murderer to return? This incident may be just a file in the history books, but in the human subconscious, it is a nightmare that awakens anew every dark night. The murderer is probably dead long ago. He took with him his identity, his motives, and the story of his terrible joy. The truth is now buried deep in the ground. The story could have ended there, but every silent night and every mysterious footstep reminds us, Hinterkaifeck is no fairy tale. It's a real horror, a cold truth. That still makes us ask, is that rustling sound on your roof just the wind? Or is it something else?
Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more horror.